Great day across Kentucky. Delighted to have everybody joining us. I'm Bob Babbage, a Babbage co-founder. We say some have clients, we have causes, and one of those is Facebook. So we're thankful for Facebook Live. Two very special guests today, the Secretary of State, Michael Adams, Secretary of State Emeritus Trey Grayson. Both of you come with tremendous bios. Certainly yours, Michael Adams, is extraordinary, having been in the Bush administration as a Deputy Attorney General and then counsel to Vice President Pence. For Trey Grayson, a long-serving Secretary of State, in his 7th year before he was pulled away by the Harvard Institute of Politics, and today heads Civic Point. Delighted to have you both. My time as Secretary of State, we did Motor Voter. Wendell Ford of Kentucky was the sponsor. Bob Taft, the Republican Secretary of State, and I were together working that across the country. Taft of Ohio. Big success, and we use it to this day. It works exceedingly well. And so we turn to you, Secretary Adams, to make sure this election is going to work exceedingly well and for you to tell us how we vote soon or on June 23rd. It's all yours, sir.
Bob, thank you for hosting this. The biggest challenge I have right now in this office is avoiding voter confusion. It's explained to voters that they have more options than ever before to safely and conveniently cast their ballot. There are 4 ways to vote in this June 23rd primary election. Number 1, obviously, people can vote on election day. Our state constitution provides for voting, quote, at the polls. It even prescribes the specific hours people vote. We didn't eliminate that in the agreement between Governor Beshears and me. We maintain that as an option for people. If they choose, they can vote in person from 6 to 6 on election day. That's not the best way to vote. I'll speak more to that in a moment, but it is a right that we preserved. Number 2, voters can vote in person early. Effective yesterday, every clerk in Kentucky, all 120 counties now offer early voting in person. The hours vary, the locations vary, although usually it's at the clerk's office. But any voter is able to make an appointment and go vote in person early. We do ask people to make appointments because unlike many of the election day sites, the clerk's offices are just not designed for crowds or social distancing. So we do prefer people make an appointment by calling their clerk if they intend to vote early in person. The 3rd way to vote is also in person. It's in-person absentee. People can request their absentee ballot at GoKYcom or calling the county clerk. But the most efficient way to do that is to go to GoVoteKY.com, apply for your absentee ballot, have that mailed to you, and then fill it out safely at home. And if you want the personal satisfaction of voting in person, hand-delivering your ballot, but avoiding the lines, it's best for everybody, you can simply come back to the clerk's office and drop off your ballot. You can drop it in the bin the same way you would on election day and know it's been received. The 4th way to vote is the way that's gotten the most attention, I think, which is by mailing back your absentee ballot. We're paying for the postage. So you can go to GoVoteKY.com, get your absentee ballot, have it sent to you, fill it out safely at home, drop it back in the mailbox, and know that your vote's going to be kept secret and secure.
Excellent. So how are we doing? That's the question everybody's asking. Are you getting the response, Secretary Adams, that you thought you would?
Well, we are. The first weekend, we launched GoVoteKY.com. Between 5 p.m. on Friday evening and Memorial Day weekend, and then the following Tuesday morning, we had 100,000 people apply for an absentee ballot. We're well over 500,000 now. Different parts of the state have different levels of use of the portal. In Franklin County, for example, right now they're the leader in the state. 30% of voters have already applied for an absentee ballot, 30%. To put that in perspective, turnout for a primary is usually about 20%. So 30% of Franklin County voters have already requested an absentee ballot. If not a single other person in Franklin County applied for a ballot or voted in person, that would still be off the charts turnout for a primary election. So Franklin County's in the lead. Franklin, Woodford, Fayette, that's where the postcards that we sent out informing voters of the portal and giving them their county clerk's phone number, that's where the postcards landed first. That's where the highest absentee turnout, if you want to call it that, has been so far. It's quite a bit lower in the rural areas, but it's still double or triple or quadruple what absentee balloting was in prior cycles, which is normally about 2%. So we're hoping that as the postcards have landed all across Kentucky now in the past week, we'll see the turnout for absentee ballots increase. But clearly in the urban areas, we're seeing this utilized more than in the rural areas. That has a lot to do with my ability to transmit information to people about this opportunity. It's easier to make the news in Louisville or Lexington with this and get the message out in the urban areas than in the rural areas. But we're doing pretty well overall.
It certainly sounds like it. I want you to know that I'll be voting today.
Oh,
Sorry.
oh, that's great.
And I appreciate the efficiency of Mr. Blevins, our county clerk in Lexington, for embracing this the way he has and choosing Kroger Field, a great site to show up and vote if you prefer to do it that way. You know, people are concerned about voter safety, the safety of the ballot and the security of the ballot. You made a theme of this when you ran, and Trey Grayson is a national expert, consulted far and wide on how elections should and could work. I know you didn't expect to sail into these troubled waters, but you've done exceedingly well pulling this off to now. What can you tell folks around the state and even around the country about how Kentucky's vote is easy, as you promised, but also safe?
Well, one thing I want to clarify is what Kentucky is doing. Is what other states are doing, our neighboring states, specifically red states, Republican states with Republican chief election officials. The governor and I didn't invent this plan out of nowhere. What we're doing is what's been done successfully in several other states who voted before we did. We paid attention to what worked, and we're replicating that here. So we're doing what those states are doing. What we're not doing is what California is doing, what West Coast states are doing. That's what the president has criticized. He hasn't criticized what we're doing here. What concerns President Trump is the notion of registering people to vote without prior consent and then mailing them a ballot without a prior request. You can see how that would be potentially subject to some sort of shenanigans, particularly in a state like Kentucky where our voter file is not up to date, according to a federal judge who ruled against my predecessor. We're working on getting our rolls cleaned up. So I think we're more sensitive to that sort of approach than maybe California might be. But that's not what we're doing. We are requiring people to apply for a ballot. That means they have to prove their identity to get an absentee ballot sent to them. They have to go to GoKYcom or to their county clerk. They've got to provide their name, address, date of birth, and social security number. That has to match what we have on file at the state on our voter file. The voter has to sign either physically or electronically or give us access to their driver's license through consent. We've got an MOU with the Transportation Department to get all the signatures on all the driver's licenses. And we use that later for signature matching. We send the ballot out, we get it back. It's kept in an envelope so that no one sees who a voter voted for. It's kept completely secret, which is required by our state constitution. We barcode track these ballot envelopes on the way out and the way back in. You can actually track your ballot at GoVoteKY.com the way you would track a UPS or FedEx package. It's pretty nifty. And then finally, we match the signatures on your application for your driver's license, what have you, with the voter's signature on the ballot envelope. And if it doesn't match, we don't count the ballot. We alert the voter there's a mismatch, and we give the voter an opportunity to cure the mismatch. But every single ballot, even if there are millions of them, every single one that we get back absentee, whether by mail or hand delivery, we're going to check that signature. Required by our law, and this plan doesn't change them. So we actually are on track to have potentially the most secure election we've ever had in Kentucky, simply because of all the controls that we have added above and beyond the ones required by law.
Outstanding explanation. I think that's nailing it. But Trey Grayson looks at elections not just around the country, but around the world. Secretary Grayson, how would you assess this process? What grade would you give us as it stands today?
Well, until election day happens, it's, you got to give the incomplete grade, but I'd give it an A in preparation and planning and an execution to date. In fact, I've been able to participate in webinars and conversations across the country over the last few weeks. And Kentucky, it's not just because I live here and I'm proud of being a Kentuckian, but I hold out Secretary Adams and Governor Beshears and the State Board of Elections team that worked together to put this plan in place, along with the county clerks, as a model for the rest of the country. we were lucky in that the pandemic started early enough and far enough away from our May primary that the legislature could tweak an existing law that was passed when I was secretary to allow the postponement of the election. So that was done first. First step was to postpone it, give Kentucky time to develop a plan, see what was going on, learn from some of the best practices and some of the worst practices in some of the other states. And then the law was tweaked to make it clear that you could change the manner of voting as long as the Secretary of State and the governor agreed, which was consistent with the theme of the precedent that was established with the postponement, that the governor and the Secretary of State had to agree on a postponement. And so, yeah, Kentucky's doing a great job. I think the reality is this is a unusual primary election. You can't hold a normal election in the middle of a pandemic. In an ideal world, the state board, the Secretary of States, and the clerks would love to have more time to be able to do something like this. There's a lot of work, and there are probably going to be, some challenges and some mistakes and things like that because it's rushed. But the decision making, the thoroughness, and the engagement was really well done. And I think voters, as they go through this, one thing that I think we're going to have to realize is that our election day on the 23rd is going to be a little bit different because there's going to be so many votes that are be cast in advance of election day and have to be counted. We might not get our results quite as quickly as on a normal election night. I'm going to be on KET providing both commentary on the results, but also trying to put that proper context. So just because results might come in slower does not mean that you shouldn't trust the final outcome. This is a process that was developed intelligently in a bipartisan way, and it is a model around the country, and people are paying attention to Kentucky, which makes me proud.
Excellent. I'll be
Thank
on
you.
KT with Renee Shaw and you, and also Al Cross, 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Central on election night, and will certainly give us a full assessment at that time. I wanted to point out that John Y. Brown III would be here if he could. He was tied up today, but says, fortunately for us in Kentucky, having a fair and reliable primary election isn't one of our problems of today. There's certainly been problems in recent days for Kentucky and America on the pandemic and other issues of concern and demonstration. But so far, we seem to be doing well. In my time, we put voter registration forms on pizza boxes, hoping young people might fill them out and send them in. Even with a little cheese or goo, it was a desperate attempt to get registration up. Now, registration is up. It's interesting that we have almost 9% of our state as independents. They won't be participating in this. But it looks to me, Secretary Adams, if you go back 8 years to a similar kind of election where an incumbent was running again at the top, we had less than 400,000 people vote, 382 if I remember correctly, 382,000. Right now, you would be on a track to beat that as of today. Let's talk a little bit about what you might expect to happen on election day itself. I know we're pushing the vote at home. I think it's wonderful. How can we gauge what might be going on the 23rd? And maybe the more penetrating question is, since everybody wants to know who won the ball game before it's played and who won the election before it's run, when will we know the winners?
Well, here's the short answer. It depends. Some of our counties are, as a matter of policy, they're going to announce the results as they calculate them. And that actually makes some sense because, as I said earlier, there's a bit of a difference between how rural counties are responding to absentee voting and how urban counties are. I expect that the vast majority of ballots in urban areas will be cast absentee. I don't think people in Fayette or Jefferson or Warren or Davis want to spend 5 or 6 hours in line, nor should they vote in person. So in these bigger counties, you're going to see most of the vote banked absentee. And the question is, how many of those votes come in at the last minute? How many of those are mailed on election day versus how many we receive in advance? And the nice thing about absentee voting is we know how many votes are outstanding because we know who asked for a ballot. We've got the list. We can check off people as those ballots come back. So in the rural areas where we're not seeing as much of the utilization of absentee balloting, my guess is your majority of voters are going to vote in person. And we're going to have, if not final results yet, at least the vast majority of votes in and counted sooner than you're going to see in the urban areas. So we have no authority to restrict counties from holding any announcement until all the votes are received, nor do I think it's a good policy. 1,000 flowers are going to bloom. Some counties, as a matter of policy, have voted, their county board of elections has voted to hold all the results until every single ballot is counted and back. So either wait until the final deadline of June 30th at 6 p.m. Or wait until they've gotten every absentee ballot back they sent out, one or the other, whichever comes first. And then the other counties, they're going to get potentially a rush of absentee ballots in the mail the days following election day, and they're definitely going to wait until the 30th. So we're going to see different results in different counties. I was doing a Zoom in Paducah a couple days ago, and apparently different clerks in different counties in the Jackson Purchase are doing this differently, and we're going to see that all across the state. So on election night, what we're going to have is the counties that have all the counties will have all their in-person votes in, and probably most of their absentee votes in, but not all of them. And so on a county by county basis, some counties will announce their results and some will not. Some will hold until June 30th. So we're not going to have a complete picture of every race in the state until June 30th, but my guess is most of our races will know the answer, if not election night, then pretty soon after.
Gotcha. So Trey and I will have something to talk about on election night in the way of numbers, correct? You think?
Well, I'd also, Bob, I'll go with the bold prediction. I think Trump and Biden, win those presidential primaries. So we can talk about that.
We'll do that. I want to point out that Secretary Adams, you and Governor Beshear worked this out. I think that's a point of high praise. It sets an example that is outstanding. In my experience, Secretary Bremer Erler, who preceded me, famous Louisvillian, did everything possible for me to be successful. And I think every secretary since that time has supported the one before and the one after, and we stick together. And you've got a united front here of colleagues and supporters who appreciate what you've done and the trouble that clerks are going to. This is not an easy thing for county clerks to do, and we should point that out. They have a lot of responsibilities, a lot of assignments. In many cases, they've been closed or working remotely, and here they are trying to put this together under the pressure of a heavy deadline and high expectations. So I know that you've worked closely with them and that you commend them as well.
I do. Yeah, thanks. First of all, I want to note that the biggest thing I wanted to avoid here, and Governor Beshear did too, is what happened in Ohio, Wisconsin. Those are worst case scenarios. In Ohio, you had the governor and the Secretary of State on opposite sides of a judge. Election day was on, then it was off, and it was on again, it was off. It was confusing to the voters, and that confusion disenfranchises people. There was no intent. It wasn't partisan. It was a byproduct of disputes over policy and law, but the end result is the voters lost. The same thing in Wisconsin. You had a Democratic governor going up against a Republican legislature. The election was on and off and on, went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. And the bottom line is people got disenfranchised. That's what the governor and I wanted to avoid, is we wanted to have rules of the game that A, were established well in advance and clear, and B, had the imprimatur of both parties on them. So no one thought that the governor was trying to monkey with the Republican primary, or I was trying to tinker with the Democratic primary. We wanted to have the public on notice of what the rules were and confident that this was done in good faith by both parties. That's how they could have confidence in the system. I do want to echo what you say about the clerks. I do want to ask Kentuckians to be patient. The clerks have never been through this sort of situation before. Running an election in normal times is hard enough. I actually testified before the legislature before I was Secretary of State last year that we have a poll worker crisis in our state. It's very hard to find and recruit poll workers to run our 3,700 voting locations. It takes 15,000 poll workers to do that. The governor and I extended the deadline several times to try to keep attempting to recruit poll workers. It wasn't successful. To put this in perspective, in Jefferson County, where I currently live and vote, it takes 2,500 volunteers to man some 600 sites. The reason there's only one location, Jefferson, is we only had 40 volunteers, 40 out of 2,500. And that's after, again, 2 monthly extensions of the time required by law for certifying the poll workers. We're seeing this all across the state. Our clerk's offices are under siege. The demand for their services has gone up. They're, in many cases, having to close their offices for safety. They've had their employees be sick, not available. some of them with COVID. So this is a very trying time for clerks. I just want to request Kentuckians to be considerate, understand that there's a reason there's a wait to get someone on the phone or get a voicemail or an email returned. But we will respond to everybody, and everyone will get to vote.
And if I could add, I think that's why, to reiterate something that Secretary Adams said when he was going through the 4 ways of voting, that's why voting with an absentee, going to GoKYcom, requesting an absentee ballot is so important. You know, if you care about your local county clerks and the people that work there and the county board of election members, and that operation, you're being a good citizen, you're being a good neighbor, you're being a good friend by voting absentee. And so for those who aren't sure about the process, hopefully Secretary Adams explaining how it works and how secure it is can allay some of those concerns. But it's not too late. You should request that ballot, vote absentee this time. We'll see how we do elections in the future. All the decision was made was in June, we're voting in the pandemic. We have to adapt. And that's what this plan is designed to do. And so I really want to encourage everybody to go ahead and do that. It's the right thing to do. It's the Kentucky thing to do.
And the deadline is Monday at 11:59 p.m. That's when we have to close the portal. I mean, we close the process for requesting an absentee ballot. And the reason we do that is if the request comes in late, we can't fulfill it in time. We can't mail you a ballot and get it back in time. So after this coming Monday, June 15th, that's the end of sending out absentee, the end of us receiving requests for absentee ballots. From that point forward, if you've not requested an absentee ballot, you need to vote in person, either early or on election day. So no cause for delay on that. We also ask you to get your ballot in as soon as you can. If you're still deciding who to vote for, by all means do that. But if you know who you're going to vote for and you got your ballot, go ahead and get it back to us, because the longer it takes us to get these ballots back, the longer it's going to take us to count them. And then the longer we have to wait for finality in the election for the candidates, their supporters, and all the voters.
All good points. We've had a couple of questions from folks saying, I'm still waiting for my ballot. A couple of them a week or so. That's not uncommon, I guess, given what we're going through. But if you get it in by the 15th, your high degree of probability you'll have your ballot back by election day. You can mail it that day and it counts. Is that a good summary of what people can expect?
It is. And by the way, if a voter uses the portal to request an absentee ballot, you can actually go to GoKYcom and track your ballot the way you would track a FedEx or UPS package. So if you have a delay in getting your ballot back, understand that it may be that the clerk's offices are backlogged. I know in Oldham County there was a backlog, but everyone got their ballots last week. It just took a few days to get them out. So be patient with your clerks. If it's been a week and you haven't got it, feel free to call your clerk, or better yet, go to GoVoteKY.com and check the status. But don't be alarmed if it's taken a few days to get your ballot back.
I would also say if you get that ballot and it's cutting it close. I mean, we all know that the U.S. Postal Service is dealing with a lot of the same. I mean, they're trying to deliver mail in the middle of the pandemic, and they've struggled over the years with their business model is in a real tough spot right now. Kentucky and Mike Duncan shares their board of governors, and he's working on trying to fix all that. So if you get your absentee ballot and you feel a little uncomfortable about the timing between that when you get it and the election day, that's what's great about these drop boxes. You can turn it in right then and there, and you don't have to worry about maybe slow mail pickup or slow mail delivery. So it's great that option's available, and that's a perfect example, Bob, for the person who asked that question. They may just want to go ahead and drop it off sometime, on election day or in advance of election day.
Well, I'm glad you're pushing that mail side, because I think that makes everything easier, and it is secure. It is important. Before we leave, I want to thank my executive producer, Julie Babbage, our research director, Rebecca Hartso, our major director for this process, Lauren Hogan, our ethics compliance officer, Willard Atkins, and Keem Babbage, who is our brand innovator. Final thoughts, though. Trey, Grayson, let's go to you, and then we'll close with our outstanding secretary. What do you think? What can you say to people to just give a slight nudge to get them in this process?
Well, our leaders in Kentucky have put together a great plan to conduct an election in the middle of the pandemic, and it's on all of us as citizens to choose the best option for us to vote. For most people, that's probably going to be to request the ballot through the portal, get it at your home, and you mail it back or drop it off. It's great that we have these leaders who set aside party disagreements, even ideological. In fact, while this was all going on, there was a disagreement on a bill that the secretary supported and the governor vetoed and the legislature overrode. They put all of that aside to develop this plan. So, request that ballot, encourage others, and please share. Especially the secretary talked about how hard it is to get out, especially in rural areas where there's less media coverage today than there were when I was secretary and when Bob was secretary. So use your social media accounts to share the ways that we can execute this election in a successful way. And on election night, don't be worried. The process is going to work. It's just going to be slower, but we'd rather it be slower and accurate than fast and wrong. So we're doing unprecedented times, and this election's an unprecedented one, but we've got good leadership and we're in good hands.
Well, Bob and Trey, I want to
Adam?
thank you. I want to thank both of you for your praise and your confidence. That's my number one goal in my term, is to enhance public confidence in our system, and I think that this approach does that. I do want to reassure Kentuckians what we're doing is a bit novel, but it's not completely new. We've actually had absentee balloting in our state constitution since 1945. So even though the right to vote at the polls is in our constitution, the right to vote absentee is also in our constitution. We've had on our books for many, many decades the right to vote absentee in case of illness or medical emergency. So this is not completely unprecedented. We're just making it easier under the circumstances to exercise that right. The controls that we have in place, some of them are new, but most of them are ones we've actually had in place for many decades. Our poll workers, our clerks officials at the local level, they know how to process absentee ballots. They know how to ensure that the ballot is kept secret and secure. They know how to make sure that it's counted and that your right to vote isn't denied to you. And so I have confidence in our clerks and our local folks on the ground to provide a safe and secure election. We're going to monitor this, obviously. We've got law enforcement assisting us, Attorney General Cameron, the FBI, and others working with us to make sure that there's no hanky-panky, no cheating in this election. I think ultimately, as inconvenient as this all has been, we'll come out of this stronger. And last point, one upside, one silver lining to all of this is we are now transitioning Kentucky to paper ballots. We'll be near 100% paper ballots, I think, this year, which was a goal of mine anyway. We are drawing down federal and state funds to buy new scanners and other equipment needed for in-person paper balloting. That's a good thing, getting away from these touchscreen machines. The voters of both parties, I've found, don't have total confidence in the touchscreen machines. We're easing those out because of COVID-19 and people touching devices. But an upside of all this is now we're going to have paper balloting across the state. Alleviates concerns about hackability, but also the lack of a paper trail. So that's progress by any standard.
Well, thank you, Secretary Adams, for the tremendous effort to pull this off. It's a great step, a very important breakthrough for our state. We very well could set the model for every other state in the future, given some of the fumbles and stumbles other states have had. So to Governor Beshear and you for working this out, for you working on this constantly, Secretary Grayson promoting it, we'll all stick together and do the very best we can to create something of consequence and participation greater than usual, maybe greater than ever before. Thanks again to everybody for tuning in, and thank you, Secretary Adams, for being with us today.
Thanks so much. See you soon. Thanks a lot.
See ya.